Hello there, my name's Phil Williams and I would like to welcome you to Audio Angling, the podcast site of fishingfilmsandfacts.co.uk. Once again, Graeme Pullen is the Chief Investigating Officer here, having driven from his native Hampshire to Devon to grab himself some of the superb very early place fishing they enjoy in these parts, often with the feel of winter having barely gone away. Never a man to waste an opportunity, which is always good news for audio angling, he also managed to get Anglo Dawn 3 skipper Chris Roberts in front of the microphone for a grilling on the inshore, offshore and sheltered estuary prospects, with potentially enough good fish at all three locations to keep even the most seasoned boat angler happy.
Okay, well I'm here down in deepest Devon, in Salcombe with Chris Roberts. He runs the Anglo Dawn 3. It's a brand new boat. His first boat was actually a lock-in, which was Ted Cook's old boat, who was a very famous Salcombe skipper, and he's changed over to a 38 about 2 years ago. So Chris, tell us why you make the change to that boat and give us a little bit about the specifications on it.
One of my main reasons for changing the boat was partly because of the age of the lock-in, but I also wanted to try and provide a better service really for my anglers. A lot more space on the bigger boat, a few more creature comforts. We've got microwave, a good kettle, stuff like that. A lot more space to put fish, good storage for the fish. So we're kind of just a lot of reasons really. I needed to update stuff like my electronics, to the way things are going now. So a lot of reasons really. It was either that or I just totally gutted the old boat and started again.
What sort of fuel range? I mean, those new Evolutions, I know there's some on the South Wales coast, and they're popular there. The guys seem to gun them right up past Milford Haven, and I know one of the skippers actually ran across to what I consider my shark grounds last week. Didn't catch anything, but he's running one and he's absolutely delighted with it. Are they pretty economical to run?
Yeah, they're superb. I've saving a massive amount of fuel a year in comparison to the lock-in. We hold just under 1,200 litres of fuel, and I can get a good three wrecking trips in before I've got to think about fueling up again. Sometimes if I'm a little bit closer in I can do 4, and that's sort of 25-30 mile out, and sometimes a bit further.
Now I saw out in the harbour you've literally just come back off a trip. I know you're going to be out tomorrow I reckon for the lean. I saw a sort of large, it's not a cargo, but it's got fuel on it. What's that fuel boat there for? Yeah,
that's for us. That's where we fuel up. I have actually got a fuel bond on the fish key as well. So if I need to get away early or something and I need to take on a bit of fuel, we get fuel delivered there also. But most of it we get off of the fuel bond in Salcombe. But the prices are getting a bit silly at the minute.
Well, that's right. I mean, I have heard one of the other skippers, he went from a twin engine boat to a single because he said he could afford to actually reduce his prices. I think it was Frank Shaw down in New Haven was saying that it's so economical now he has to look at, maybe easing back a touch on the fuel or on the throttle and he's saving money on fuel, which enables him to pass that cost on to the anglers as reasonable rather than hitting them up too much. So how are you finding things generally for anglers?
Yeah, well, I'm finding it better simply because I've got a more economical engine, but yet we're going faster. Yeah, we're probably cruising around at 15-16 knots quite comfortably all day long, whereas the old boat was probably 13 and a half, something like that. But yeah, I'm not burning so much fuel, so the maths there is quite nice, really.
What about boat handling characteristics on that? Are they good with sort of beamy seas? I mean, I've got one of those Wilson flyers and it's just, I love it to death, but it pounds you to death in the head sea. And I know they got that sort of similar hull shape to those Evolutions. What are they like? Is there any good seas and bad seas with them?
They are very, very comfy. A very dry boat. The lock-in was pretty wet at times, but these boats are very dry, superb in the following sea. You can punch into a bit of sea and not get particularly wet, which is quite nice. So yeah, I can't fault it there at all, really.
What about electronics? I understand you've got some Garmin stuff. Just run us down on what electronics and gadgets you got on there, fish finding equipment, radios and stuff like that.
Yeah, I've got all the Garmin gear. I've got the flat screen 4005. and I've got the sounder module onto that one. I've got a 1 kilowatt transducer that goes into that one, so that gives very, very good detail. I'm very pleased with that. I've also got that wired into a switch, so I can just turn the switch off, which turns the sounder off, because I do feel quite often when we're bassing, stuff like that, I don't like the sounder on because I do feel sometimes it speaks of fish. So I've got that wired to a switch, and that seems to be working quite well. I've also got a smaller Garmin unit that I use just simply as my chart plotter, which is very good for drifting the wrecks and stuff, which I've got all my wrecks plotted out on there. I've got the bigger unit is wired into my autopilot, which is again saves on fuel over a period of a year rather than you steering. It does tend to keep you on a better line. Got VHF radios, CD player. Thinking about getting the telly as well to watch the rugby on the way in. So yes, pretty good really.
And I understand you were a fan of rugby and actually a participant.
Yeah, I was once upon a time. I got a rugby scholarship to Australia, so I was over there playing for a few years, and then I played for county level at every age group over here, southwest of England. I got through to the final 54 of the England squad at Colts and 21s, but buggered up my leg. I tore the cruciate ligament in my knee playing for Albion, because I got paid for playing rugby, which was quite nice. And I've just had surgery on my shoulder. I've had my shoulder open again for the 4th time, and I've got a few screws and a nut and bolt in that now, so I've had to knock rugby on the head.
Well, I've got a few screws and nuts and bolts, but they're all loose, I'm afraid, Chris. So with the shoulder, was that done from rugby? Was that a rugby injury?
Yeah, that was. Everyone says how much they like to score tries, but I did it in a crunching tackle, superb tackle, good dump tackle, but yeah, pay the consequences for it afterwards. There you go.
Well, at least you can steer the boat, that's the main thing. Now, what's your actual history down here? How did you get into fishing? Was it family members, or did you work for other people? And actually, when did you start chartering?
I lived here all my life. I was born here. My dad has always been a very keen angler himself. He took me fishing when I was about 2.5, something like that, 3. I caught a dogfish, apparently. I don't remember it, and then it just went from there. Really, it was what Dad and I did. If we went out, with rugby, because my dad played rugby, then we were out on the boat, and it kind of went from there. I then got a job with Ted Cook, going across the Channel Islands when I was about 18, 19, 20, something like that, before I went to Australia on my scholarship. And then I worked on a fishing boat out of season in Australia, so I was doing that over there, and I I just knew that it was what I wanted to do. I knew from the word go, but there was always one problem, and that was money. So I took myself off to college. I'm a brickie by trade. I managed to save some money, and once the bank could see that I had quite a comfortable income coming in, they were then happy to lend some money with the help of my dad, and that's where we went really. I then managed to get the money together to buy the first boat, Anglo Dawn 2. Then after the bank could see how I was getting on, I had that boat for 6.5 years, and then bought the new boat after that.
Did you ever get into commercialing at all?
Yeah, I've worked on the crabbers, probably on and off, probably 3 years or so working crabbing. I've got a little boat that I do scalloping and stuff up in the estuary in the winter months in Salcombe here, just to keep things ticking over. I've got a lot of friends that work on the commercial boats, mainly crabbers really.
From the mention of scallops you got there, I know when I interviewed Frank Finicum, he's an old-time commercial and rod and line man down in Falmouth. He does oysters. Do they do dredging for oysters up here in the Salcombe estuary?
You do get a few when we're scalloping, but it is only a few, and they're not particularly big either. But yeah, the scallops are quite good. You can end up with, I think my best day this year was 36 dozen. So it's we did quite well really, and keep the scallop skirts because they're good bait for for the place.
Oh, really? That's one tip. That's one we know. When you went out, I just mentioned this because it's all over TV now about the commercialing with the Aussies going out there. It was pretty tough sort of fishing. What was it you did out there when you were commercialing out there?
We were working over the continental shelf, so we were about 110 mile out over over the Barrier Reef, so on the deeper part of the Barrier Reef, and fishing around the Barrier Reef for stuff like Morgan's cod. We had Morgan's cod, we had Red Emperor was the main thing that we was targeting. That averaged probably 30-40 pound a piece. We did get a lot of shark. They fish for shark because they have the fins for shark fin soup, and they also, some sharks they use it over there, they call it flake, and that's what they use in the fish and chip shops over there. So we had a bit of that as well. But,
So
that was all drop lining, either rod and line or just reels bolted onto the gunnel of the boat.
Oh, I see. Really, really. So it's like commercialing, but rod and line commercialing.
Yeah.
Now down to this Salcombe area, got a fabulous, beautiful, pristine type of area you've got down here up in that estuary. I've been doing a lot of video work up there today because the sun's been out. It's been brilliant. So tell us a bit about the area. You know, what species and what time of year you start fishing. I mean, up round my way, which will be sort of Salcombe way, I guess, is cod time, December, January. But what's it like early in the year down here in Devon?
Yeah, we're pretty lucky really. We've got a huge variety of fish, and there's always something going on in 1 month or the other. Say if we started in January, obviously prime pollocking time for us. That's when if you're ever going to get a big one, probably 80% of the time that's when it's going to be January, February, March time. Had another good year on it this year. Some cracking fish been caught.
What sort of size would they be when you?
My friend of mine actually had one, not on my boat, but he did have one which I think weighed 25-12, I think it was, or something. He's a very good friend of mine. But we've had quite a few sort of 18s, 20s. We had them up to 23 last year. So good fish and quite plentiful as well, which is nice.
I assume you just use lures. Is there any particular lures you use, and do you use a regular flying collar rig, and how long a trace, stuff like that? Any special tips you can give people?
Yeah, one thing I have found this year, I've had some guys out with me that fish with me quite regularly, fishing clubs and stuff. Some of them are only turning up with say 6, booking the boat for 6 of them, but they are using long traces. And we found that's worked very well on the sidewinders and these new evolution lures. We've probably been using 20-25 foot traces at times, and that has really produced. You've got to have your wits about you a bit, because obviously it stands a bit of a better chance of getting in the wreck, but it also does produce some nice fish. So I would advise some people to try that really.
So Chris, I've tried it a couple of times myself with no real great success, but is there any way of fishing more than one regular or one sidewinder, fishing a pair of lures either in tandem behind each other, or what we call a pose when we go marlin fishing side by side on a spread of bars? Anybody tried it, or have you tried fishing more than one?
Yeah, we've got guys that do try that, and it can work very well. What we do is run quite a big boom into a 3-way swivel, and then have good length of trace from the 3-way swivel down to your weighted sidewinder, so you've got a sidewinder there, and then we use a smaller, obviously much shorter trace going off the 3-way swivel to a jelly worm, or just an ordinary red gill or something like that, or anything that's not weighted really, and that can work very well.
So I assume that's because the sidewinder with the weight in it is going to swim up deeper, and the jelly worm's going to be over the top of it and they're not going to tangle? Yeah,
that's it. That's the one that's weighted is keeping it away. And not only that, we think that perhaps going through the water it might look like the sidewinder is perhaps chasing it. So that can quite often attract the fish. Perhaps when they're being a bit finicky, we often try that, and that can work well.
Well, that's certainly a good tip, and I'm going to experiment on that one as well myself. That's worth trying. Now, tell us about the outside of the fishing. What sort of species you're going to get through the year? Run us through the year, say from about springtime, March, April time, right through to October, which is peak time for, I guess, your anglers chartering.
Yeah, well now, middle of March onwards, going into April, May, we're spending a lot of time up on the skerries. That'll be fishing well through, into June, where it goes all the way through the summer really. But that's when you get the majority of the bookings up there, and then through the rest of the year you're doing quite well. And then it really picks up again sort of late August, September, going into October. So we do spend a lot of time out there. Coming into May, sort of middle of May, you then start getting out on the wrecks. That's when we start getting our cod, our big cod. May and June is an awesome month for them. That's prime cod time really. Now we're getting some cracking ling. We had our biggest ling last year, end of March it was. That was 33.3. Lovely fish. We did also have quite a few top 20s, which was quite nice. So now is the time for them as well. April going into May.
Out on the skerries, I guess the angler's going to start there, say in the spring. Plaice, turbot, brill. I know you get pretty well everything down there. Give us an idea on some of the rigs, and also is there anything different? Because anglers always ask me, how do you catch your turbot? I said, I don't know, I think I've had about 2 small ones, so I'm not the one to ask. But give us a few tips on each of those species of flatfish.
For the plaice, we were up there yesterday. We use a 2-hook rig, one quite close to the lead, because we use the watch leads as that's dragging through the water. That does tend to kick a bit of sand up. They then see the bait quite close to the weight there. So quite often you get them there, and then we have another hook about probably 6 foot from that one, 5-6 foot from that one. We tend to use just beads there. I do have anglers that use spoons as well. They do well. I've got one particular guy that always uses a spoon. He uses a spoon with probably a foot of line behind the spoon, loads of beads, and he does very, very well. He's a good angler up there. Do tend to have the black and green beads always seem to be quite good, and also the yellow and orange do very well also.
What sort of bait are you using? I guess you're using rag or squid, or do you use combination of both?
Combination baits, definitely. We're using rag, squid, prawn is a must up there. That does very well. People have been using this garlic prawn thing, which is a new one. That does seem to work. Peeler crab, very good, and lugworm is a very good bait up there. We also use razorfish. Scallop skirts are very good. Quite often just cut the underside or the belly of the mackerel and cut that out. Cut thin strips of that, which works well. Strips of sand eel, that works very well.
What about for, say, brill and turbot? They're the two hierarchy ones that most anglers will act as a prized possession for them. What's your tips on those?
Yeah, well, we had, I think we had 3 or 4 little turbot up there last year. Admittedly, it's not a massive amount, but we don't tend to get a huge amount up there now these days. But I think there's a bit of a comeback on them, so touch wood and see how it goes. But we tend to use a nice fillet of mackerel. Make sure we cut the bottom of the mackerel out where stomach lines, so it's a nice flat bit, so it's flapping around on the bottom as opposed to spinning. And then quite often we do that, just hook it through the once, and then get a strip of sand eel and hook that through as well. That's a very good bait for the brill and the turbot.
Do you get any bass on the skerries?
Yeah, you get the bass. Certainly down towards start point area. On those banks there, on the start race and stuff, that's very good for the bass. More towards when you're going into July or August, September time.
What techniques for those? Bait and tackle. How do you fish for those?
Live sand eel does tend to be the best bait really up that neck of the woods. A nice long trace, sort of 12, 14 foot, something like that. On the start race, we literally just use as small a lead as we can to drop it, to get us to the bottom really, and that's it. It's not particularly deep there, so you can use a nice light lead.
What about hook size and leaders? Do you use fluorocarbon, or what's your favourite sort of leader make, or not even really make really? Is there anything you got to specialise you think makes a difference for the bass?
Bass is something I do enjoy doing a lot, and we do use a good fluorocarbon, good clear line, probably about £15, something like that. So that does work very well. I do tend to, I mean, some people come on the boat sometimes, they've got coloured line and stuff like that, and I just do think you've got to use clear line really.
Yeah, I know I get some coloured stuff, and it's all right for trolling or maybe shark fishing, but for anything else like bass, I just don't feel right using it. Now, as well as the sandbanks you've got, there's obviously plenty of rock marks and reef marks around here. Just tell us about some of the, perhaps the names of the local rock marks where they can go congering, what species you're going to get when you anchor over the reef, and what your terminal gear and baits are.
We've got a good bit of reef slightly down to the west of us. Very, very rocky ground. You get all sorts on there. We've had black bream to £5 off of there. You get good cod, pollock, ling. We've had some ling to over £20 down there. There is literally a case you get some nice ray. We've had turbot down there. You can have anything. It does fish very well. We quite often use the Portland rigs down there, especially for the bass. On the bigger tides, we use the Portlands.
And explain that to me, the Portlands. What's that rig?
Portland rig, basically just a swivel at the top with a bead, another swivel in your line, and then a bead and a swivel. So that it's basically running up and down a short trace of line about a foot long, and then you tie your main line that's going to your bit of live bait or your sidewinder or something. You can tie that to probably say 12-14 foot or so, something like that, and it just basically spins around your lead, so it doesn't very often get tangled, and that works very well.
It sounds like one, I think it was Neil French, one of the skippers, he had something called a helicopter rig, which he did explain to me. I wasn't quite sure. I could sort of see it working, but so it doesn't tangle. I think that was definitely it was for bassing, and it was a similar situation whereby it was free swimming. It didn't tangle, and you could move all around in a different area, which he rated for bass. And also I think a couple of other skippers we've done these podcasts, they both think about switching the sounder off. In the shallow water, they got the feeling it might mess the fishing up. So what sort of species would you get over these reef marks? And the size of fish like congers and bullhuss and stuff?
We get congers, do get a few bullhuss. Can't say we've had a massive amount up there, but you get the ling, the cod, the pollock, all that. We've had some cracking days on the bass. The bass you get down there tend to be the bigger fish. You won't get much under sort of £4 really. It's all sort of £4 to £8 sort of stuff. 3.5 to £8, something like that. We did have just under 10 last year up there, which was quite nice. And our biggest bass was 12.1, I think it was.
Big fish. That's a big fish.
Quite good.
Also, I've heard about from a small boat angler with a dinghy. He says really good blonde ray fishing here and small eyes. So what's that about?
Yeah, we're very, very lucky here. Really, we've got some big banks, literally 1.5 miles off of Salcombe. We call them the whiting banks to the locals here, but they hold some ginormous blondes. You get small eyes, you get thornies, you get all sorts. We are very lucky there. It's a cracking area to fish really, but there is also some marks literally just off of the back of Salcombe really. You can anchor up, especially if you've got a small boat, in probably 50 foot of water, and you can get some cracking ray fishing. You also got a chance of some of the plaice and stuff also.
What sort of baits are those for the blondes and the small eyes?
We tend to use sand eel and mackerel really, and for the thornies we always use prawn. Try and get live prawn for them. Yeah, that works very well.
When I was down doing some videoing, I noticed I could actually see the skerries. I think it was a place called B Sands where I was filming down there. It's so flat I could actually see the tide race, and obviously I could see a bunch of boats, little white dots, so I guess that's what it was. But when I was driving around up on the hillsides, you could actually off the headland see the tide races. What's the tide strength like down here, and what sort of leads are you talking about, and depths?
Yeah, well, the skerries is a pretty shallow area really. As long as the wind's not blowing too much, you'll get away. We were fishing up there yesterday with 3 ounces of lead all day, which was holding bottom perfectly. Sometimes you have to go to 5 or 6 if you've got a bigger tide and the wind's blowing. But on a big spring tide here, really, we'll probably be up around 2.5 knots, something like that. On the smaller tides, sometimes you'll struggle to get past a knot, which can be a bit frustrating from our point of view. But we do have quite big tides, and that does help our fishing, especially for the bass.
Moving offshore from the reefs, we've done the sandbanks, we've done the rock marks, which obviously is plenty of reef marks if anybody's got a small boat they want to trail down here and take out. What about the wrecks? Are they sort of fished out inshore, or is there still some good fishing? I say that because if guys come down in a small dinghy, they want to go out, they might do, 10 miles. Is it worth fishing up to 10 miles? I assume most of your best wrecks are going to be further than that, but is it totally fished out down this end?
No, I wouldn't say it was. I'm 34 years old, 33 years old, and I do a job I love, and I hope I'm doing it for years to come. And the way the fishing's been, we've got wrecks. We've got a line of 3 wrecks that are off of Salcombe, about 4 miles off of Salcombe, and you can pretty much guarantee you'll catch cod on them in June. And that's quite a nice thing, really, for guys that have got a small boat and they want to get out in amongst it. We've also got a couple of wrecks that are about 12 mile off. One of them is a very big wreck, and this year, that was for some part of the year on the Pollock-in, that was as far as we had to go because there was a nice bit of fish on it. Not last year, but the year before, it was amazing out there. We were just, I think the furthest we went was about 15 or 18 miles simply because we didn't have to go any further, so the guys had more time fishing.
What do those cod go to? I wasn't aware you got that many cod down there, so I'm sort of surprised at that. Tell us sort of, on the numbers on an average day and what your biggest fish might be.
Well, I would say last year was probably our best year on the cod, and I think it's fantastic that a lot of cod's getting put back. When we're on the reef and stuff, it's nice to see there is a bit of protection with the cod now. But I think our biggest cod last year was 23, or just over 23.2 I think it was. But we did have a lot sort of between 18 and 23, we had some cracking fish. Numbers wise, we were probably 20, 30 plus a day at times, very, it was very, very good, it was, and even on a bad day, we was probably still, 15 or so, with not bad size also.
I guess you've got some Pollock-in mixed in there as well,
Yeah.
Do you get any coalfish out here?
We've had 5 this year, so far, yes. Biggest has been about 12 this year, and we had our biggest last year was 16, 17, something like that. Nice fish, and our biggest that we've had the whole time I've been fishing was 21 that was caught on the old boat.
What about, you mentioned the black bream, do you ever see any? I would never catch the damn things now, but what's happened to the red bream? Are they about now, or do you think they just disappeared totally?
Well, we've had one, so that tells you that.
That's a short
and unfortunately, the one thing we don't get a great deal of down here is black bream. We have had a few, but it's not like how they get it up the line a little bit. They do seem to be a bit plentiful up there, but we struggle a bit here, unfortunately.
Offshore, I know on your website you do shark fishing. Run us through the shark fishing. When does that sort of start, and how you fish for them, etc., and what sort of fish you'd expect to catch? I know they're going to be blue sharks, but have you ever had any other unusual occurrences out there?
Yeah, shark fishing. Where do you start? I've done a lot of that in Australia actually, so it's something that I do enjoy. We fish with them, obviously with the balloons to keep the traces up. Quite thick traces, £250 I suppose, something like that. We have got a few wire traces as well, but I'm not a massive fan of that. Using either, sometimes we use live bait, sometimes we use just whole mackerel, or sometimes the flapper works quite well. But we do tend to have to change them more often to keep the scent going. We've had a bass last year whilst we were fishing for a shark. Yeah, I couldn't believe it. That was just over £10 I think as well. Okay, yeah. Couldn't believe it. It wasn't going like a normal shark was, and then we brought it to the side of the boat, and there it was. It was I wasn't expecting that one.
Have you seen anything, threshers, poor beagles down here? Because I know Brixham, they used to get them in the nets, commercial caught threshers now and then. Have you Seen anything unusual out there?
Yeah, a thresher, only one, and that was, I think, 3 years ago now. Not caught any though, we've only had blues. But we we probably average 2 or 3 a day, I would have thought. We do okay. Some days we have had more, and I think we've only blanked on one occasion, I think, so it's not too bad, quite good.
How far off do you run to get the blues? Is anybody going to get there in a small boat, or do you have to, go a long way?
No, we're normally probably 12, 14, 18 miles, something like that. Obviously you have got to watch the weather a little bit if you were in a small boat, but yes, it's not too bad. We tend to try and fish around, perhaps if there's a nucleus of wrecks somewhere, so that could be a bit of a food source for the sharks then.
Now that's pretty well covered the offshore, Chris. Obviously you've got loads of fishing out there, loads of sport, and access to everything from sandbanks to reefs and sharks to wreck fishing. But just before we go inside to the Salcombe estuary, I heard you talking to somebody saying that you've been doing some really good ling. Are they on the same wrecks a cod are, or how do you fish for them? And do you anchor, or is it drifting? It sounds like maybe you're drifting a lot. Do you not do much anchoring out on the wrecks?
We do anchor. I don't get a great deal of guys that particularly want to anchor, partly because they're going to they'll probably catch conger, and a lot of guys aren't particularly bothered about conger. They want to get food for the table, and that's fair enough. I understand that. I mean, the conger do fight very, very hard. They are good fun to catch. I did have a diver say once that they did see a lot of dead conger back around the wreck, which I do think is a bit of a shame. Yeah.
And from what reason would that be, you think?
Just after it had been fished and they had been put back, but they were sort of around the wreck dead, which I do think is a bit of a shame, really. So we don't get a great deal of people that want to anchor like that. The anchoring we tend to do more of is for the ray, or sometimes for the bass when we're float fishing for the bass. But ling-wise, I've found personally we catch more, and we do a lot better if we're on slack water or the smaller tides and just very, very gently drifting over the wreck. Bouncing live mackerel works very well, or mackerel flappers, fresh mackerel. It needs to be fresh really, and just bouncing them over the wreck or down the side of the wreck. Quite often we try and drift down the side. If the wind's going in the right direction for us, we can do the side of some of my favourite sort of ling wrecks really. And that does work very, very well. We've had some real good hits of them.
What do you fish? Do you fish a straight running ledge with a short trace, or do you fish like a paternoster so the bait's off the bottom for the ling?
No, we use keep it as simple as possible. Try and run it off of a boom, small boom, or sometimes the zip sliders. We use them quite a bit. Short trace, no longer than a metre. You need good £100 plus line really, because they've got such sharp teeth, and then a good probably 8/0 or sometimes 10/0 hook. Don't be shy, because they've got such big mouths, and you're using big baits, and just literally drop it down, stay in contact with it, just gently bouncing it over the wreck or over the down the side of the wreck there, keep in contact with it, and if they're there and feeding, they're engulf it, they go for it, and game on, and you've got a hell of a fight, and they are very good fish. I
imagine you've had more than one hooked up at the same time.
Yeah, you could say that. Yeah, I've got a wreck. This was about 34 miles from Salcombe. It's very, very, very broken up, but it's a very productive wreck at times. And we were out there a bit like a day to day, really. Very little wind, very calm. And we had 54 over slack water, which was good fun. Kept my anglers happy. And then we once the tide picked up again, we were back onto the pollock and the cod. So, it was a very good day.
It sounds like an excellent day. Now back up inshore is Salcombe estuary. I imagine if you've been born here, you must have fished up there. I mean, how do you rate it? Is it as good as they say it is?
I think it's better. I had my first little boat when I was about 12. Saved up my pocket money because I did a paper round, and I bought a little boat that my granddad helped me do up, which is very kind of him. Dear of him, he's not here anymore. And my dad helped me get a little 4 horsepower engine, and I fished the estuary all the time. I wasn't allowed to go over the bar because Dad wouldn't let me go over there, but I used to do all the inshore stuff. I had some cracking place. My biggest place was I had one 6.5 and a half.
Wish you hadn't told me.
And I had another one 5.14.
Bloody hell.
2 weeks apart from each other. That was September. One was caught on ragworm and one was caught on lugworm and crab. That was sort of opposite the Egremont, round heading sort of towards Kingsbridge, really.
And back then, were they all into flashes and spoons and beads, or was they just straight bait?
The big one I caught was on a baited spoon, which was we always used to. Me and a mate of mine, we always used to quite often use them up the estuary. That little bit of something extra, really, for estuary fishing. And the other one was caught on just beads. So, but we had a lot of sort of 3-pounders and stuff like that as well.
Now, I know it's famous for the gilthead. Were they around the gilthead bream? Were they there when you were a nipper out there fishing, or is that something pretty new that's come in?
Yeah, we didn't get a great deal of them, I must admit, and the ones that we've had have been small, but a good friend of mine, I think he's still got the record for up there. It was £8 or £9, I think, or £10 or something.
Yeah, huge
big fish, big gilthead. He had that a fair few years ago now. I think he still holds it. I'm not sure, but I've got a couple of friends that we tend to go up there as and when we can. About now, coming into May time is the time. Heading. You want to be heading down towards Kingsbridge Way a little bit more, but there's some cracking spots in amongst there for the gilts.
And is it deep here? I mean, give us an idea of what the depths run up the centre of the channel.
Yeah, well, where my boat's moored, that's sort of 7-8 metres, something like that, but a little bit more, high water springs, and then heading down towards. You've got like the Salcombe side of the bridge down there, really. That's when it starts to dry out. So you've got to watch yourself a bit then. But other than that, around the saltstone and stuff like that is can be pretty good area. You can get some quite nice bass in around there at times as well. What
do you tell us sizes on the bass? Or are you going to do you live bait for those?
No, you're not allowed to live bait up here.
Oh, really? It's restricted.
Yeah. So you're not allowed to, but. You can use like lures and stuff like that. Quite often you get the schoolies and stuff on just ragworm. But I mean I had one of my guys that came out fishing with me. The weather wasn't very nice, we couldn't get out on the big boat, and they just asked if they could come out and have a little fish on my little boat that I use as a tender. So we went out and he had a nice bass on the saltstone and it snapped his line.
Oh,
he was a bit gutted.
I bet he was.
It looked like quite a nice fish, to be fair.
What about rays and stuff? What other species are you going to get up there? Rays, mullet, and tell us about sizes.
Yeah, loads of mullet, but that's something that's been an absolute nightmare for me to catch. But I've got a couple of friends that can catch them for a pastime. But they do tend to be harder to catch in Salcombe than the likes of Dartmouth or something like that. I think it's because of the amount of boats going through and stuff, But you can get them. You get some cracking thornbacks in there.
Really?
Yeah. A lot of. I think the record last year over, I think it was February time, was broken for the thornback in there. Big fish, 20 something.
2 something, I think, was it?
22 and a half, something like that, cracking fish. But yeah, we also get, it's done very, very well this year again for the flounder through the winter months.
Really?
That's produced some cracking fish.
What sort of size
quite
do they
big
go?
numbers. Oh, it's they've been up to sort of 3.5, I've heard. So yeah, quite nice fish, but quite good numbers. Some of the guys from our fishing club in Kingsbridge, they've been out and had 8, 10 on a session light, which has been quite nice.
Any small eyes there? Do you get anything like that, or are they mostly outside in the faster tide?
Yeah, we tend to get the small eyes do tend to be a little bit further out, the back of the bar and stuff.
Congers? Any congers up in the estuary if you're anchored in a small boat?
Yeah, there's a couple of areas that have got like sort of made reefs, really, I suppose, where they've plonked a fair bit of rock and stuff down. You do get a few strap congers and stuff in amongst there. There was a big conger caught up the estuary. It was, I believe, it was £64.
Bloody hell!
But that was back in late 80s, I think it was. But yeah, that was there was a wreck. There's a boat that sank up the estuary, and that over time produced a little bit of fish, but it's not there anymore.
Well, certainly some brilliant fish in there. So, Anyway, I think we're pretty well wrapped up there, Chris. You've given us a good insight into it, and I know you're going to give me a few marks for the magazine. So if guys want to come down with a small boat, there might be a few inshore places. They're all well known to obviously a lot of the charter boats and small boat anglers as well know. Obviously, it's not difficult going to get a chart and find the skerries and stuff, but maybe you tell us a couple of good rock marks and somewhere up the creek perhaps, or even a good shark line drift or something like that when you say drifting amongst the wrecks. So Chris, I appreciate you giving us the time and the information. We wish you well for tomorrow, and hopefully we get to fish with you in the future. So thanks very much for Chris and his boat. You can no doubt find advertised everywhere, and it's going to be one reckoned with in the future, hopefully.